Accountants in general are either high-level decision makers or decision influencers. On the other hand, it's very, very common that CPAs will be entrepreneurs, but if they are in industry, their leadership influences how that whole business often functions. We like CPAs to be innovative and technology leaders rather than technology laggards.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Randy Johnston. He's the Executive Vice President at K2 Enterprises. Randy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Kelsey. It's a pleasure to be with you and your listeners.
Yeah, excited to have you. So Randy, why don't you start and tell me a little bit about yourself?
Happy to do so. I'm out of Hutchinson, Kansas, have been a technologist and consultant for 40 plus years. Frequently teach continuing professional educations for CPAs and often help businesses with their strategic initiatives. So that's been a real pleasure to do for several decades.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like, all of that experience has led you to K2 Enterprises. Tell me more about K2 Enterprises.
Yeah, K2 formed as a business approximately 40 years ago. All CPAs globally need continuing professional education. In the United States, that's referred to as CPE. In our Canadian operation, PD, professional development, and CPD in the UK and so forth. But the equivalent basically holds 40 hours of continuing education. We typically pick technology-related topics to try to teach accountants how to leverage their time with technologies. So that might be accounting software or workflow software, document management software, and so forth. But we're normally trying to help the professional and their clients, if they're in public practice, or their organization, if they're in industry, be more efficient with the technology.
Mm-hmm. And how do you present that continuing education?
Well, our markets work in different ways, but we produce multi-day technology conferences. So I'll be doing that, for example, next week for a group, and I've got actually colleagues doing the same thing today. So, but typically we'll have 19 sessions taught over 2 days, opening keynote, three breakouts, closing keynote type of format. Or we do all-day sessions, 8 hours. Sometimes they'll be shorter session, 4 hours, and sometimes we're invited guests to other conferences. We also provide in-house training. We further write articles and other things. So we're in lots of different channels. We maintain a YouTube channel for small things, and we also have our own podcasts for various technology topics.
That's fantastic. And, truth be told, I did a little bit of research on you before we came on this podcast. And it looks like, you certainly have years and years of experience in the technology field. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about that?
Happy to do that. And it seems odd to me, but I've actually been writing computer code for over 60 years at this point, and have been doing artificial intelligence for over 50 years at this point. So, with all the frenzy around artificial intelligence today, that seems interesting to me because it's not something that's new. It's actually closer to 60 years old in terms of its origin as well. But yes, you're absolutely right, Kelsey. Typically, whenever there's been a new technology that's been evolving, sometimes I've been fortunate enough to help with the creation of the technology, or early on, I learn about it and help people understand how to adopt it to apply it. So some of the things that we actually helped create were things like Windows and Microsoft Office, and much of the hardware products that are used in the market as well. So laser printers and servers and portable computers, things like that, smartphones, so it's interesting to be around those smart people, developing those products and giving them feedback on how to get that done. But being really simplistic about it, if there's a new update, so for example, Microsoft Office, Microsoft 365 has a new artificial intelligence feature called Copilot released this year. We've been teaching people how to use Copilot effectively.
Brilliant. And why do you think it's so important that the work that K2 Enterprises is doing for CPAs, why do you think that's so important that, they're able to stay up on technology?
Well, accountants in general are either high-level decision makers or decision influencers. They often control the purse strings, if you will, in large organizations. In fact, for a public company to have a CFO, they have to be a CPA. So they're in the big companies, it works that way. On the other hand, it's very, very common that CPAs will be entrepreneurs. They'll start businesses. They often have the titles of CEO, CFO, VP of Finance, Controller. But if they are in industry, their leadership influences how that whole business often functions. If they're in public practice, meaning they typically do tax, audit, client accounting services, advisory services, they're frequently helping 75 to 150 businesses be better at what they do. So if the CPA knows about how to use technology, they can encourage their clients or their team members to use the technology as well. So we like CPAs to be innovative and technology leaders rather than technology laggards.
Yeah, technology laggers. I love that. So, when you're thinking about the emphasis that K2 Enterprises places on technology, do you think that's one of the keys that makes K2 Enterprises stand out from its competition?
It's not only one of the keys, it probably is the key. There are a number of providers to CPAs of CPE. Most of them do it in a specialty area like tax or audit. Our benefit has always been being leading edge on technologies. And that is true across anything that is a technology front. So it could be accounting software or whatever. But if something's new, we're normally going to be talking about it. So when ChatGPT was released on November 30th, we were talking about it within the next day. And same way when DALL-E was released. And that's our normal strategy. If something's new to the market, we're going to typically know about it before it's released. But in worst case, we're going to know about it the day it's released, learn about it and say, okay, how does this apply to the practice of accounting? And that could be mundane things like scanning invoices and doing optical character recognition and extracting balances. Or it could be something very innovative like automated workflows or interactions of all kinds.
And does K2 Enterprises require a certain level of experience to attend these trainings or anything like that?
Well, courses do have different prerequisites, but in general, many of our courses are overviews or updates, which means that you can come with very little experience and be fine. But for example, on Power BI, a very popular analytics tool from Microsoft, we actually have a series of multiple courses, 8 courses. So obviously each one requires the predecessor course. But typically, we're going to take people from no knowledge or minimal knowledge to intermediate to advanced. Now, a rather interesting observation, Kelsey, of all these years of teaching, and I've written college textbooks too, is people who perceive themselves to be advanced tend to not be. People who tend to perceive themselves as intermediate tend to be a bit more advanced. So when people come to us and say, well, I'm an advanced user, we don't try to insult them, but we do ask a few questions and figure out pretty quickly, yeah, maybe not so advanced. So, we help develop pivot tables with Microsoft as a client, and Excel pivot table is a very powerful tool, but many people do not know how to use them to the full benefit. And even inside a very well-known tool like Excel, things like data tables, many professionals that are quite literate don't even know what a data table is when I say it. And it is clearly one of those things that should be used. So, our goal is to say, this feature makes sense. You ought to use this. That one it doesn't have much applicability to accountants. But let's pick on something that we had the pleasure of designing years and years ago while we were consulting at Microsoft, the accounting format in Excel. Being able to line up the periods and commas and all that, you wouldn't think that's a big deal. But the programmers thought, who would use that? Who cares about that? Like every accountant on the planet. Why do you ask?
I'm curious to pick your brain a little bit too, talking about misconceptions. I imagine there's a lot of misinformation out there. You mentioned kind of people perceiving themselves to be at a higher level with technology. I'm curious to pick your brain generally, what would you say the most significant misconception about the field would be?
Well, now that's an interesting question with maybe this insight to feed it. In general, in the field of accounting, people believe that the accountants are dealing with just numbers all the time. And the fact of the matter is, they're really better as business advisors. So while they may have expertise in tax or accounting, it is clear that most CPAs are actually good business advisors if you'll ask the question. Now, when it comes to the technology use, a clear misconception is that younger CPAs are more literate than older CPAs on using technology. That turns out it ain't necessarily so. So many of the users have used apps, but they really don't understand how to use the technology. So they kind of, I would say fake it till they make it, but they actually don't have enough fundamental knowledge to do many things. So a misconception is that, younger people know more about technology than older people. That actually turns out not to be the case. It is a function of how much you've been around it, what you've been exposed to. Perhaps you're passionate about learning it. And to me, that's a great thing, Kelsey, is if people are passionate about a particular area, whatever the business is, whatever the item is, they're going to know more about it in general. If they're not passionate, they're just going to kind of coast along. And I am so sad when I see professionals of any type, not just accountants, but of any type, that aren't leveraging their skills because they're just not passionate. They're showing up kind of, I'll say, taking a check. And that does remind me of the old cathedral story about the three bricklayers, which were all asked the question, what are you doing? Well, I'm making money to take home a check to feed my family, or I'm building a wall on this building, or I'm building a cathedral. And, I'd ask you which one of those three are more motivated by what they do.
Interesting. And what would you say to that?
Well, for me, I've been building cathedrals for decades. But, sometimes cathedrals take hundreds of years. If you've ever been aware of the cathedral in Barcelona, it's still under construction, so many years later. But it is important to me to do something that's bigger than I am. And that's part of the reason I've always had that personal mission of helping people use technology in the way that benefits them the most. I'm not the judge on that. I don't know what will benefit you the most, but if you can tell me what you're trying to get done, I can suggest to you the best technology and the best methodology to accomplish that goal. And that's where I've been super pleased to learn about so many different businesses and to help them be more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Randy, in the effort to be more effective, where can people go to learn more about K2 Enterprises?
Well, we maintain multiple sites, but k2e.com is our primary site. That does link to our accounting software world websites, our CPA firm technology website, and our totally paperless website, and our CPE Today website. Now, people have said you should always have just one website, but we actually designed our websites to be specific around those different topical areas. But k2e.com is the launch pad, and that gets you to everything else.
Talk to me about those other, topical areas.
Well, as it turns out, I've had the privilege and pleasure of helping design much of the accounting software that's used here in the United States. Anything from entry-level products like QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online. I'm the first point of contact for Xero here in the United States, Zoho Books, on up into the mid-market products like Sage Intacct or NetSuite, on up into the big players like SAP and Oracle. Probability is if you name the accounting product name, I've probably done some design work with them. So accounting software world is all things accounting software, accounts payable modules, business analytics, and so forth. So that's all in that area. On CPA firm tech, to run an effective public practice firm, you have applications in different areas. Besides tax and audit, you are also likely to have practice management and document management and workflow and client accounting services and advisory and 1099s and on and on. So everything that's related to a CPA firm, we collect there. And then totally paperless is kind of what it sounds like. When document management began becoming popular about 30 years ago, we decided that we'd collect everything document management and workflow together in one place. And that's been very helpful too. So those are the three areas of technical focus that support accountants.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Well, Randy, this has been a fantastic conversation. As we start to wrap up, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with, either, about CTEs, CPAs, the industry, anything you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I would maybe keep it a little general here, and I'd direct it at you yourself, as your listeners. If you have a technology need, there is almost certainly going to be a product or a process to solve that. Not always, but almost always. And sometimes it'll take you a little bit to find it. And in general, you can count on most accountants globally to be trusted advisors. They're always going to do what they believe to be you, their client's best interest, as opposed to, I'm in the business to sell you something. And that attribute in the accounting profession is known as independence. In other words, they don't have a kickback or a commission or something coming along the way. So if you have not only a technical problem, but maybe anything related to accountants will generally be able to guide you to the right answer, even if they don't know the right answer. So that particular role as advisor is very, very valuable. And frankly, that's why we're so happy to equip these advisors with better knowledge to give better answers. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and really assist with the technology portions as well.
It is. In fact, the technology pieces, I would say every day I am asked questions like that on the order of 6, 8, 10 a day. It's not unusual for me. And, I just say, well, look, based on what you're telling me, based on what I know, here's the best way to solve that particular issue. So in any case, but if you've got an issue that you're trying to solve, keep looking, because generally there are solutions in almost every category out there.
That's fantastic. Well, Randy, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you, breaking down K2 Enterprises, talking to me about the industry, the importance of really, applying technology, being fluent in, technology and utilizing technology to the best of your ability to do better work, to be a better advisor. So I really appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
Thanks for the invitation, Kelsey, and we'll listen to you and see you again.
Yeah, great to have you.